Alrighty. How's everybody doing today? All right. So this is the 26th of May. I'm Joe, also known as the Stoic Viking, and we are going live and we are going to cover, we're going to do selection. We're going to cover most of the selections. The only one that we're not going to cover is SEAL Team 6's selection. And we'll start with going through a bunch of the tier 2s, and we'll eventually finish with Delta and ISA. So you can see we have a bit of a background behind us, and we will be, if you will, kind of going through. We're going to talk about what sort of each selection entails, what the style of selection, whether they're yelling at you, whether they're not, whether it's more team oriented, whether it's individual oriented. Apparently, I can't speak today. And what are the hardest events for most selections? What's the longest, like, rucking or running event? And what are some tips that you need in order to better prepare yourself for that particular selection? All right. So if everybody can hear me, just let me know. All right. Awesome. All right. Can you guys hear me? Yes, no, maybe so. All right. All right, so we do. All right, boys. So we are going to start. Actually, let me do one thing. All right. So we're going to start with RASP. All right. And I've sort of ordered these together with the first two selections is going to be RASP and BUDS. And you're going to notice a trend. So the first two selections, which is RASP and BUDS, are the two where they're really yelling at you. Like, this is the style. And then slowly they transition towards more maybe not sort of using of negative reinforcement to the point where there is absolutely no reinforcement, which we'll see later with the Delta and tier 1. All right. So, all right, let me just get everything going, and I just got to update this one thing real quick. Give me 1 second. Okay. I wanted to make sure I had all my notes so I'm not screwing everything up. All right. All right, and away we go. All right. So everybody wants to know how to pass selection. Most people think it's about being the strongest, the loudest, the toughest, or being the most motivated person out there. But that is not the truth. At elite levels, fitness is only the price of admission. What separates people is discipline, emotional control, self-reliance, adaptability, problem solving, and the ability to perform when either under pressure or in completely uncomfortable situations. And you're doing this whether you're being sleep deprived, you don't know what's going on, your motivation is getting crushed, and especially in certain selections, you eventually all feedback disappears, and this really screws with people. Because selection is not just testing your body. It's probably even more than testing your body. It's testing your mind, because your mind is usually the first thing to fail. And you can push your body past a certain point only if you are ready to push your mind past that certain point. So it's actually more important that you are you want to be physically prepared, but you have to be mentally tough. So selection is a filtering process. The goal is to identify people who can operate effectively when things become uncomfortable, uncertain, and mentally exhausting. Selection tests reliability, emotional control, problem solving, maturity, teamwork, self-reliance, discipline, endurance, and judgment. Selection is not about proving you are the tough one. It's about proving that you can stay effective when everything around you is designed to make you quit and when shit just goes bad. So we're going to start. Let me switch this over here a little bit. And let me turn. How do I? Okay. Anyways. I don't. Okay. All right. So we're going to jump into RASP real quick. I'm trying to see. Oh, wait, there it is. Okay. Now we go. I just wanted to. All right. So RASP. Oh, wait. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. So obviously we're going to talk about different stress styles. The first two are very big on the stress styles where they're yelling at you, which are creating chaos, smoke sessions, immediate correction, and constant intensity. Other selections create stress internally. That means silence, no feedback, long solo movements, ambiguity, and really kind of testing how strong you are as an individual and without feedback. And I can't begin to stress this enough, how much more this actually screws with people than people getting yelled at all the time. So the more external pressure you're going to find in RAS, BUDS, parts of MARSOC. MARSOC actually is kind of very similar to SFAS, where they are not really yelling you as much. Like there are some moments where there are some on-spot corrections, and then you're kind of slowly transitioning to that ISA, that Delta, which is completely solo, and you get zero feedback whatsoever. You don't even know until you are randomly on a truck being whisked off, and then you are brought into a room and told you, thank you for being here, thank you for trying, and good luck to you. So the higher you go, the less people need to scream at you because the environment itself becomes the stress. So RASP. RASP, if you didn't know, stands for Ranger Assessment Selection Program. It's about discipline, standards, aggression under control, accountability, and proving that you can function inside the Ranger Regiment culture. So it's got about 8 weeks. It has a very high intense, loud correction, smoke sections, constant standards, very kind of old school, as you're going to kind of see. Like both RASP and BUDS are two of the oldest selections that we have. So you're going to notice there's a trend that these older selections really concentrate on yelling at you, telling you to quit, telling you're worthless, trying to get rid of people through that process. So what are they looking for? They're looking for your discipline, your attention to detail, your reliability, your physical and mental toughness, and your ability to not only work under stress, but to work within a team, to have team accountability and consistency. So both RASP and BUDS are very team oriented. A lot of the things that you're doing involve your teams. Obviously, there are some individual events, but they probably, of all the selections, RASP and BUDS definitely involve teams probably more than the other selections. All right. So the hardest events of the RASP is the Coal Range, the Ranger Obstacle Course, the Darby Queen, the combat water survival test, and basically your Dayton line land nav. The coal range is one of the most infamous parts of RASP. The difficulty is not just one event, it's a combination of sleep deprivation, physical punishment, and smoke sessions, movement, mental pressure, and constant correction. It breaks rhythm and exposes people who cannot maintain standards under fatigue. So this is, by far, like it says, the collection of these events. This is the people that struggle in RASP outside of getting hurt medically, because that's kind of really where a lot of people are medical drops throughout RASP. Is a lot of people have trouble with the coal range. So their longest movement in RASP is a 12-mile timed ruck, often listed between 50 and 65 pounds, depending on the standard and the context of that particular movement. So how do you prepare for RASP? So for physically, you need to, because there's going to be a lot of movement with weight and you're going to be rucking quite a bit, you need to ruck often. You need to prepare for RASP by doing some sort of ruck training program. And just obviously there are standards for speed, but it's really more of the endurance and getting used to constantly having a ruck on your back is a huge thing, not just physically, but it will be mentally, because when there's going to be times that you're going to want to quit, and being someone who's used to having this weight on you all the time is definitely going to help you. You want to, obviously, what's moving you around is your legs. So you want to build, not only do you want to work on building your leg, but your core and your back strength, because that's probably the three things of your body that are affected by rucking the most, which is your legs, your back, and your core. If you strengthen those and then you ruck pretty often, you're going to be pretty good physically. You can train other things to help your movement, like calisthenics, just your overall flexibility, because flexibility is strength. And this all just comes down to, the more you do this, you develop your sort of high work capacity, develop that VO2 max, as much endurance as you can, because if you've got the strength, then the only thing that's going to kind of screw at you after that is going to be your lack of work capacity and endurance. And very important when it comes to the RIs and the Rangers instructors is pay attention to detail. That is definitely a big thing. And you don't want to get your team all hemmed up because you couldn't pay attention. So RASP punishes inconsistency, because one good day is just not enough. And it's a pretty long, 8 weeks is not a short amount of time. So any questions? Let's go over the questions real quick before we move on to the next section. Okay. How do you handle the weight and rucking? How much can I do? So if you are ever going to start rucking, I would start, it's very important that you progress into it slowly, because one of the biggest problems that most people have is when they start rucking and preparing for a selection is they start too quickly, too fast, add too much weight, and the distances are too long. If you'll get shin splints, like probably one of the most common injuries. And, luckily a lot of the rucks are better nowadays. Back when I went through, we were using Alice packs, and those will bore like holes in your lower back. But you just overall need to get used to it. And I would start out I would do 2 rucks a month or a week, one sort of long one where, you start at maybe 5 miles where you just walk, and then a short one, which is just a ruck run where you run the entire time. And I'd start at 2 miles where you just run the entire time. And then eventually you slowly progress this, not only in distance, but slowly progress the weight. So start low. I'd start with probably like 25 pounds. And then eventually you want to work yourself up into that 50, 60-pound range, especially if you're going to a tier one selection. Yeah. All right. So let's move over to the Navy SEALs, BUDS, which is Basic Underwater Demolition Selection. I believe that's what the S stands for. I could be wrong, but I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that I know what I'm talking about in this case, that I know all these sweet acronyms. All right. So BUDS is a water confidence, fear management, suffering, emotion resilience, and team accountability. So it's about 24 weeks, which comes out to about 6 months. And it's also, and their selection is obviously they're there for 6 months, but it's not like how some of the other selections where they're constant for 6 months, right? You have the obviously eventually at the beginning is the hardest portion, and then eventually it kind of also becomes like a bit of their training course as a part of that whole 6 month process. And I think especially outside obviously Hell Week and other things, they actually have like the weekends off. So stress style. So it's very similar to RASP in that it's extremely high external pressure, yelling, chaos, definitely cold water, the waves, surf torture. There's boat evolutions, uh, obviously sleep deprivation, and just constant movement. So that's kind of probably the biggest things that they try to get you with is that chaos, that it feel like that never ending, like you never stop, you're not getting enough sleep, and just like when you think that you might be getting slightly comfortable, they're going to throw your ass into the surf and make you get all cold, and that's pretty much the only time that you get to sit still is when you're freezing your ass off in the surf, and then they're going to rinse and repeat until and that's how they try to get you to quit in BUDS. So what they're looking for. So obviously you're SEALs, so they're going to look for water confidence, obviously mental toughness. Um, you know, there's going to be a lot of things using boats, boat proficiency with the boat evolutions. You're going to go through drown proofing, right? And this goes back to a lot of things that I've said before about becoming uncomfortable, becoming comfortable, becoming uncomfortable, and drown proofing, and what you're going to be doing in, especially in the pool sessions, and then the water evolutions, which you're going to be doing underwater. That is going to be all about managing your stress, about staying calm, because they're going to screw with you, and becoming comfortable being uncomfortable is a very important skill when it comes to this. And you just have the ability to overcome our fear and panic. And you can be the biggest dude, like the best dude at managing your stress. All those dudes, basically the great decider, the great equalizer here is water, because you could be the toughest dude in the world, but if you suddenly start feel like you're drowning, this is really where you truly find out if people can manage panic and manage fear, because whether you want to or not, your body is going to almost involuntarily make you want to panic, because it's a defense mechanism. You're drowning, your body's like, hey, get to the surface, and you have to overcome that. You have to basically be in full control, and that requires definitely a level of mental strength and fortitude that not many other training events really bring out. All right. So their Hell Week is about roughly 5.5 days of minimal sleep. So this is everybody who's seen any of the movies, knows that much about buds, it's been out there, is they have Hell Week, which is definitely their hardest event during buds. And if you make it through Hell Week, it's essentially sort of downhill from you guys for them after that. So this is the big event that they train up to. They're obviously getting smoked, but Hell Week is essentially they're going through everything at a higher rate. They're basically getting no sleep for the entire 5.5 days. And they just kind of ramp everything up that's been going on to like the next level. So it's roughly 5.5 days of minimal sleep, constant movement, cold exposure, boat carries, log PT, and surf torture. And the levels of emotional stress are at the highest they will be during buds. And it's designed to expose whether candidates can keep functioning while the suffering is basically nonstop with zero sleep and adding cold exposure is something that screws with people more than they think, right? Because everything's really, really sucks and a lot of people can manage it. And some cold just screws with people. So I'll give you a quick little side thing. When you're in SEER schools, right, you will quickly learn there's usually 3 things that can basically break people. 1 is cold, 2 is sleep deprivation, and 3 is hunger. What you learn in SEER school is you're going to be tested all 3 of these. You're going to be without food, you're going to be sleep deprived, and you're going to be cold. And you'll quickly find which of the 3 affects you the most. For me, being cold actually affected me the most. I actually didn't mind not having food because after the first day, you're kind of fine. You kind of become numb to the idea of hunger. And sleep deprivation wasn't a big deal for me because one of the first nights I actually went to sleep on the ground because I was, during my evasion process. And I was so uncomfortable because anybody who knows about sleeping on the ground, the ground will just zap any sort of heat that you have in your body. And I got up, I was so cold and so uncomfortable. So for the rest of SEER school, instead of going to sleep, I would actually stand up and I would pace around to stay warm. And that's actually how I was most comfortable. So cold exposure definitely can screw with people more. And everybody's got their own worst of the 3, like the things that affect them the most. But definitely cold is very common. And you could be going through everything else. And then that cold comes in. And then that's where those guys start ringing the bells. So the next part, which we kind of already touched on, is one of the next hardest parts of buds is the pool competency and drown proofing. So, and you'll hear about this not just in buds, but as Green Berets who go to the SF dive school, they are going to put you into these exercises, these events during the pool events that essentially you're going to drown, right? If obviously you have instructors and safety divers who are there ready to resuscitate you, but that is the level of comfortability that you have to be with the pool events, because you are going to feel like you're drowning. If you are pushing yourself, you're going to feel like you're drowning. And so these events expose panic. And any sort of ego that you may have had at this point, water definitely removes it. And you cannot fake being calm underwater. You either have it or you don't. So, all right, I'll finish this and then we'll get into the questions. All right. So the one thing that buds doesn't really do is they don't really, they're not traditionally ruck based like pretty much all the other like Army and selections are. So the longest movement is actually cumulative boat, log, sand, surf, running, and continual physical work. So that's actually one thing that they don't really have to do, which is cool for them, right? Obviously, everything else sucks, but they don't really have to do much rucking. Obviously, there are some events where they do actually have to go out and carry gear, but it's not ruck focused, because you notice most of the Army selections are very ruck focused. they've got their own reasons for that and belief of how they particularly do things. So how do you prepare for buds? So you gotta, obviously, you want to try to be mentally tough. You want to prepare yourself physically, because you can be what you want to in almost all these selections. The same theme is going to come up. When I say prepare yourself physically, the general across the board thing that you need to take away from for preparing yourself physically at the bare minimum is to be in a level of shape where you're not going to get injured, right? Because you'll notice in RASP, buds, and you talk to all these different people who went to all these different selections, the most frustrating thing is that you didn't quit, that you actually got injured and then you had a medical drop, right? And in a lot of cases, they'll let you come back again. But anybody who's been through selection sucks so bad. It is a mental hurdle unto itself to want to come back to selection. So prepare yourself physically enough to where when you're going through all these physical events, that your body can handle it and you're not going to get injured. So that's the very baseline. Obviously, some of these selections, you need to concentrate on certain other aspects, probably a little bit more. So baseline for buds, be in such good shape, you don't have to worry about physically getting hurt. All right. Next is swim and tread constantly. Not only just in your like swim trunks, but actually get inside of a pool in your uniform, because you're going to want to learn how to swim in your uniforms with your boots on, and then just become comfortable with the water, right? Obviously, you can practice on increasing your breath holds and everything like that, but it's confidence and just familiarity with the water that you have to practice, just repetitions after repetition. Just become like it's almost your second. You're home away from home. It's just another environment. You love the pool. You live in the pool, right? You're basically a fish. You're Aquaman, baby. So practice, build that confidence, practice that breath control. And because buds takes so much on the beach, takes place so much on the beach, learn how to run in the sand. Anybody who's ever ran on the sand or ran on the beach knows that running in the sand is not, it seems like fun until you do it, and you'll be like half a mile in and your calves are going to be burning. Your feet, especially if you're doing it barefoot, are going to start to ache, right? So it's definitely like with anything, it's not a particular exercise that you've done, because there's running and then there's running on sand. These are actually two different things. You need to practice it, right? Luckily, in buds, you're mainly going to be running with obviously boots or shoes on. So, but practice running in sand. It helps. And then at the end of the day, and then you're obviously helping to build some mobility. Calisthenics is good. You are going to be lifting a lot of things over your head, whether it's logs or boats. So definitely having some level of shoulder strength and some shoulder endurance is definitely helpful for this particular selection. But most of them are all going to come down to have strong legs, have strong core, strong back. But buds, you're doing a lot of things, lifting things, heavy things over your head for long periods of time. So if you're going to buds, do some shoulders. There's a little piece of advice for you right there. But at the end of the day, what buds does is their biggest weapon of selection is the ocean, because of the emotion. The ocean becomes the weapon in bud selection, and they use it masterfully to try to filter out the candidates and try to get the best people. All right, let's take a quick, look at some of the questions. Let's see. If you are a 12 series with a Sapper Tap, are you likely to be an 18C? I'm going to be honest, when it comes to who gets chosen for their particular MOSs, you would think that it actually helps when you want to get like a specific MOS, whether it's 18 Charlie, 18 Delta, 18 Bravo, 18 Echo. It it doesn't help as much as you think it does. Just like, for example, if you were 68 whiskey, you would think that you would be a shoe-in for 18 Delta, but that's not exactly how it works. So I would not bet on that. Like, it may help in certain situations, but a lot of times it doesn't. Someone said that white SEALs are like the Navy's airborne infantry. How tactically proficient are the vanilla SEALs in your opinion? Oh, they're definitely way better than airborne infantry, right? Like Navy SEALs are very, very tactically proficient, right? They're, definitely, they're as good as Green Berets and Rangers. They're definitely on that tier 2 special operations, direct action level having skills, right? Your airborne infantry does not have the level of training that your Navy SEALs do. So there's, whether the argument about Navy SEALs versus Green Berets and Rangers, that's maybe a much closer of an argument, but the Navy SEAls are definitely way more tactically proficient than airborne infantry. You must have had a very bad brain injury, my guy. Are you talking to me or are you talking about somebody else in this chat? I definitely did. I had a really bad brain injury. That's why I have such speech problems. But we're getting better at it. Just tuning in. What's the discussion / chat? So we're talking about selections and what they're the difference of them, what each kind of one is sort of entails, and how to prepare yourself mentally and physically for each one of them. How do you judge character? Well, that's a video unto itself. Character is what people do. A good way, I once heard this, a character is what people do when nobody's looking. That's character. I hate cold water therapy. I will tell you that when I first started doing cold water therapy, I definitely did not like it. But when you do, the more often you do it, the easier it gets. Like I can now jump into a cold plunge and not have a problem anymore. But I did repetitions at it. I practiced it. It got better. I learned to stop being a bitch. Oh, don't you worry, Joshua George. We are getting into the Army stuff. We're just covering all the selections. All right. All right. All right, here we go. Next, SFAS, the Green Berets. I wish I could cue some music. We could play the Green Beret song right now. All right. So SFAS, Special Forces Assessment and Selection. It's 3 weeks. It's about 3 weeks. They actually did, when I was at 5th group, actually did experiment with bringing SFAS down to 2 weeks because at this time they were actually trying to create a 4th battalion, or they were creating a 4th battalion in every special forces group because special forces were so effective in Iraq and Afghanistan, they wanted to produce more of them, right? And this actually goes against the tenet of special operations, which is you can't mass produce special operations forces. Well, they tried. And let me tell you, there's a reason why it's 3 weeks again, because mass producing special operations or trying to does not go well. And it did not. So there was a time SFAS for a short period of time was 2 weeks. They tried this as an experiment. Didn't work out. So SFAS is 3 weeks. So SFAS is about quiet professionalism, self-reliance, land navigation, maturity, problem solving, emotional stability, and independent thinking. So the stress style, it's definitely a lower stress style. This is starting with the SFAS and all the ones after this. You're going to notice there's a downward trend of how they do the stress, less chaos. They're not screaming at you the entire time, telling you that you're worthless, that you need to quit. It's definitely, there's a whole lot less of it. You do more individual events. And so you have some levels of high isolation, especially during the STAR course, silence. There's going to be uncertainty, long solo events, minimal feedback, and you're definitely working on stress management, which is definitely more important or more vital when you're by yourself. So what are they looking for? They're looking for self-reliance, obviously land navigation ability, problem solving, emotional stability, maturity, judgment, humility, and independent thinking. The hardest events of SFAS is arguably the STAR course. And obviously there's some people, it could be argued, but most people believe it's a STAR course. I think that's what gets most people. And you'll hear about Scuba Road. There's definitely some difficulties within the team week with the ruck and the load carriage, but everybody that I have talked to who's went through, what gets most people is the STAR course. So the STAR course is an infamous individual land navigation, where essentially you're doing land navigation by yourself. And a portion of it will definitely be at night. And the terrain is not the easiest. And you are obviously going to different points in sort of a series of direction where you're almost basically form a star, which is one of the reasons why it's called the STAR course. So you're going to be navigating solo with a ruck, and you're going to be finding the assigned points in obviously both day and night under strict time limits. So you actually have a time limit you have to complete this by. So the points are scattered across the wilderness in a star-like pattern. Each point can take you farther into the woods, forcing you to repeatedly move, confirm location, and make precise navigation decisions. The rules is you must find a required number of assigned points. If you miss too many points or you fail the time standards or lose accountability of where you are, you can result in being dropped. So it's in the thick woods swamp area of near Fort Bragg. There's mud, there's darkness, there's a lot of water crossings, there's dense vegetation, there's a lot of terrain changes. And this is where you definitely, for the first time of most, if you've only done easy land nav, because most Army bases have easy land nav, this is definitely some of the more difficult land nav that you actually need terrain association. You cannot dead wreck into these points. Let's see. So in the STAR course, you're going to hear about Scuba Road, right? It's a notoriously difficult swamp area where candidates may have to wade through deep, murky water while carrying their ruck overhead. And it can definitely be physically draining and psychologically frustrating. So why is the STAR course hard? So one, it's definitely some more to the advanced land navigation terrain. It involves approximately 20 to 30 plus miles of movement. About a 45-pound ruck, day and night navigation, isolation, no feed pack, and you definitely have that time pressure. So this is definitely one of the first events that, like you'll notice that this is the toughest event in SFAS, and we'll get into this later. Luckily, SFAS only has this say you have this equivalent of STAR course. Going to Delta and ISA selection is like doing the STAR course every single day. So that's just already kind of give you an example of what the difference between the tier 2 and the tier 1. That does not make this any less difficult. The STAR course is not easy, and it's designed like that for a reason. So you need to know pace count. So if you're going to do terrain association, you need to know how to do pace count, which is knowing your exact steps for every 100 meters you go. And that way that you can use that, because if you need to go around a piece of terrain, you need to have your pace count and your azimuth directions. If not, you will get lost and you won't get back onto track as you go around certain pieces of terrain. You can do this during day, but you also have to practice this because this is much harder at night. Like everything else, everything is harder at night. The terrain, the fatigue, the hills, and the darkness all change your stride length. So that's why you need to know your pace count when going over different types of terrain, how you may change your movement going around certain things, how you're turning, and especially at night, a lot of people have a shorter stride at night. So you need to know what your pace count. So knowing all these things make you that much more effective as somebody who's doing land navigation, especially when during terrain association. So if you can practice all these things before you get to SFAS, you're going to be essentially head of the pack, and it's definitely going to help you out. But and I can't stress this enough, terrain association is very important, right? And this is obviously you need this in Delta selection, because Delta is by far the worst terrain I've ever seen. But for terrain association, you use roads, creeks, hills, draws, ridges, handrails, backstops, and other features to confirm where you are. Because the reason why you used terrain association, because you can't just walk in a straight line to everything, right? And you need to use these things, whether they're handrails. There's a number of different techniques, but this is how you get around these certain types of terrain in order to get to your point. Because when you can't dead reckon, you have to do terrain association. So, and obviously you can, and if we want to get, one second. So when you're trying to terrain associate, you kind of move to a known terrain feature. You take a shorter precise bearing over 400 to 500 meters and then to the target. So probably this is like a longer video that I could get into of how to do terrain association. And actually, now that I think about it, that actually may not be a bad video, is how to really break down terrain association. But I will save that for another time, because I could already tell that I am going to go down a rabbit hole and we'll never get to these other selections. All right. So next is another difficult time during SFAS is Team Week. So Team Week brings group problem solving. You've probably seen pictures on the line where they're carrying gigantic timber logs, probably, simulate, moving missiles or scuds or anything like that. You're going to be evaluated on your leadership. There's these, like I said, known as apparatus carries, logs. They're going to be giving you awkward loads, both weight and shape. And you have to figure out how between your team, how to move them certain distances. So this will expose ego, poor teamwork, lack of leadership, and emotional instability, because these are very frustrating situations, because you have to be sort of very creative. And the more creative that you are, that can definitely help. But when you have, in your team, so many people trying to come up with different things, and this is where you're going to start to see infighting, and they're going to be looking at you of how you work within that team environment, especially these very high stress team environments. And there's designed in order to bring out the people who suck on teams, because especially in an SF team, you're very team oriented, because their style of mission is they get dropped behind enemy lines, hook up with the local rebels, whether it's like Vietnam, the Mountain Yards, Afghanistan, after 2001, it was with the Northern Alliance, and they sort of help to train up the local militia, the local rebels, and they create their own little army. But we got to remember, they're behind enemy lines, right? So they're very self-sufficient within their team, but that's all they have is that team. So teamwork is extremely important in SFAS in order to evaluate. They actually do have a long movement, the trek. It's commonly discussed anywhere between 18 to 24 plus miles, and you are carrying probably over a 45-pound load at least. So How do you prepare for SFAS? Mainly because it is one of probably the thing that gets most people in SFAS is the STAR course. Practicing land navigation, both day and night, terrain association, and know your pace counts, right? Over all different types of terrain during the day, during the night, and being able to ruck under load because you're going to be moving under load with a ruck on. Even when you're lifting these apparatuses and you're doing these team events, you're constantly going to have a ruck on. So have your strong legs. One, prepare for rucking well in advance, right? The faster you are, if you can ruck run, awesome, great. Being able to constantly know what that weight is like. So you want to build your legs, build your core, build your back. And because there's so much land of it, because you're also toughening up your feet, also learn how to take care of your feet. Build like foot care habits, because it's very important, because if your feet get screwed, you're done. Trust me. You can be the toughest guy in the world, but if you screw up your feet so bad, it doesn't matter. You're gonna be a medical drop before you know it. And then, of course, once you have that strength from the rucking ability, have that endurance, build that VO2 max, build that work capacity, and then train alone, because you really need to start learning how to be by yourself, manage yourself. It's great to have a buddy who's like trying to encourage you, help you to progress, but you're definitely going to start doing stuff in this selection and then other selections farther down the road, especially the tier 1 level. You're by yourself, so you really need to know how to push yourself by yourself. And it's a more important skill than most people realize. But land, and I can tell you that one of the reasons why the STAR course kind of screws the people is, one, you're by yourself, you're at night, you may not know exactly where you are in that time standard, and the land navigation exposes panic very quietly. All right, so let's go down. All right, let's catch up before we go on to our MARSOC Raiders. Let's catch up on little questions. Let's see here. Let's go up. Let's go up. All right. I got an 18 X-ray contract with the National Guard here in Texas. I ship out in August. My running work times are yet where I want them to be. Will I have time in OST to train? Did I sign that contract too early? No, you're going to be fine. Look, you prepare as much as that you can, but you do have they don't, like, for example, you're not doing the STAR course the very first day. And a lot of these selections, you're going to ramp up. The more prepared you are, the better. But at the end of the day, you prepare as well as you can up to it. But then, you know what? Screw it. Send it. Just, because even if for worst case scenario, you, for some reason, get hurt or you don't make it, you are going to learn more about yourself going through these selections than you can through probably almost anything in your life. And you talk to anybody who's ever been a selection, it is one of the biggest character building events of their lives. And I think everybody should try it at least once. Right. During GWAT, when I was really busy, it went from 24 days to 14, I believe. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, it went to 14. I actually had because I was actually at 5th group when that happened. What is the difference between ISA and RRC? So RRC is, think of it like this, right? And so this is not exact. Obviously, there's other things that they can do, but I will tell you that RRC, think about what you would think of what tier 1 Rangers would be, right? They definitely are like tactical reconnaissance. They definitely do direct action. They are the tier 1 of what you think basically like the more advanced, the better funded, the better skilled, the better trained, the better individuals of Rangers would be. And so where ISA differs, I think it's easier to explain where ISA differs. ISA is, so think of RRC as that tier 1 tactical reconnaissance, direct action. And ISA is more of, they also do levels of direct action, some very small portion of it tactical reconnaissance, but the majority of the unit does more covert and clandestine intelligence operations, probably similar to what you think the CIA would be doing. So the RRC is probably doing more overt stuff, if you will. Like they'll probably be in uniform, and ISA is probably almost rarely ever in uniform. They're in civilian clothing, they're in other statuses. So that's probably the biggest difference between ISA and RRC. So think of tier 1 Rangers versus CIA. Yeah. What was the worst Stoic Viking story of selection? I will actually get to that when we get to ISA selection. There's not much terrain issues that can be done at the Sand Hills. Will they give beats? Flo, come in with a $5. Talking about selections, could you talk about Army aviation if you have knowledge about it? I definitely have some knowledge about Army aviation. We'll get into that. Actually, Flo, what do you want to know about Army aviation? We'll get it. Let me ask that question. The 3 most important things in selection: don't quit, don't fall below the standards, don't start beef with your instructor. Bernal, these are, everybody's listening. This is all great. This is a great comment, right? He says, remember, number 1, don't quit. Absolutely. That's number 1. Don't fall below the standards. So be physically prepared and move as fast as you can. And the last is don't be a tool. Don't be a douchebag. And not only, and he says, don't start beef with the instructor, but I would actually even say that is probably not as common, but what's more common that people get peer evaled out is actually because of being not a good teammate. All right. Some people, like start beef with their instructor. That's definitely the last thing that you want to do. But definitely something that's more common of a problem is people who start beef with other teammates. All right. Be a great teammate. If someone starts giving you the edge, you know what? Just let it if someone starts giving you crap on your team, just let it kind of pass over you. Don't let it affect you, because how you respond to that, especially when the instructors see that somebody's being a bit of a tool, how you respond to it and how you manage it is also something they're going to evaluate. So just because someone's a dick doesn't mean you need to be a dick, right? Obviously, there's ways to confront that professionally and effectively, but that's something that you should always basically be concentrating on. How do you trust somebody is evil or not? Well, that's a much more in-depth conversation. Yeah, you see it as the bare minimum, pull more weight, also motivation, leadership skills, how to accept input, how to read people and utilize. Yeah, all true. All right. All right, I'm trying to catch up, boys. Let's see, Sneaky Peeky, X Seal here. Appreciate your content. Been watching your stuff about identity. Would love more hot takes on that because we all joined to do the thing. Sneaky Peeky. We can definitely, basically the quickest, obviously I could talk about this for hours. The biggest thing is it's so easy when you do these type of jobs, especially these hard jobs that take so long to get to, and there aren't there's a level of prowess to it. You're proud. Obviously, you became a SEAL. That's something to be fucking proud of, right? Don't let it be your identity. Don't when people are like, so if I was to ask you who you are as a person, and if you say your profession when describing who you are as a person, you're already tying your identity to what you do. Your identity should be tied to who you are as a person, and that's your character, right? How do you treat what do you do when other people are not looking? And then 2, how do you treat other people? How do you treat people that are less fortunate than you, right? These are the things that I feel like those are the types of things that really build who you are as a person. It's not about what you did. Like what you did is important, right? But that's your experience. That's where your wisdom is. That's not who you are as a person. Hope that makes sense, or hope that helps. But that's definitely a soapbox I can get on. We can talk about for hours. I turned on for the bub, so I'd add that boats on heads destroys people. People comp is almost as filtering as Hell Week, and third phase is a secret kick in the nuts. Absolutely. And that's why I said if there's one selection, almost all the other selections, legs, back, core. But if you're going to buds, get your shoulders in, all right? Because you're gonna be that lifting that stuff up, the boats, the logs. Yeah, that's no bueno. Never heard anybody. Yeah, it definitely screws with people more than most people who have not been through it think. Okay, Flo coming back in. Okay. If you already did you already do that twice? Flo, did you do another $5, bro? You're my best friend tonight. All right, interested in going Army Aviation. I was wondering what was your take on it. Okay, Army Aviation is essential because somebody has to learn how to fly those helicopters. Army Aviation is way different than all the other aviation branches, like Army, Air Force, and Marines. All their aviation is very similar. Army Aviation, I think, is the worst out of all four for a couple different reasons. One, we don't get call signs. What is that? All right. Two, we are not allowed to wear flight suits. I don't know if anybody knows this. You look at old Army Aviation, Vietnam, other time frames, Desert Storm. They changed it sometime in the 2010s, I think. I think it was like mid 2010s. But the reason why Army Aviation pilots are not allowed to wear flight suits is because the Army, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they didn't want to make the rest of the Army feel bad or they didn't want Army aviators to think they're cooler than the rest of everybody else, right? They don't want to make them think that they're different. So that's why now what Army aviators wear is the traditional uniform, but it's made out of like Nomex, which is like the fire retardant stuff. So it's a different material, and then there's some slightly different pockets. But yeah, that's why we're not allowed to wear flight suits in the Army, is because they don't want us to think that we're too cool and make the rest of the Army feel like we think we're better than them. Even though Army Aviation definitely had to go to school to be better, right? They have to go to training. They have to go to at 18 months to, could be longer, training to become a pilot. So I don't know. We let Green Berets and Rangers, they get to wear berets, they get to stand out, but Army aviators can't. It's dumb. Definitely one of the flaws in government and Army logic, but I digress. Let's see. If you already know a language, can you skip the language part of the Q course? As a matter of fact, yes. Certain depends, right? It depends what group you're going to. If the language that you know is in that area, yes. Like so, if for example, if you're going to 7th group and you speak a language that's in the air responsibility, which is South America and Central America, that you definitely probably can skip. If you are going, like, say you're going to 5th group and you speak Spanish, there is an argument there that you may not be able to skip that portion of the Q course, but this changes all the time. That's why I can't be definitive about this, because there are certain rules and policies that are in place and they get changed all the time. So if you already know a language, there's a good possibility you could skip, especially if you're going to a group. The group air responsibility that you're going to has the language that you know. Keep streaming, brother. The industry is full of face tattoos and street walking women reading magic cards. It's nice to see someone like you are here. It's definitely one of the most first comments I've had like that, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you, brother. Silver Soldier just coming in, just crushing it. All right. How would someone who is more introverted or even with social anxiety navigate through leadership position during selection? That's a good question. There's actually way more introverts in special operations than you think there are. Everybody thinks it's just these like extroverts who just big buff extroverts running here. That's not what special operations. Majority of special operations is dudes between 5'7" and 5'10", and a lot of them are introverts, right? So leadership is a skill, right? Even if you're an introvert or an extrovert, right? You can learn leadership, and it takes practice. The thing is, if you're an introvert and someone tells you to lead somebody, right? You're not going to be like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm an introvert. You're going to try, right? And you learn that by, it's repetitions, and leadership is only learned by getting into leadership roles. So, as long as you just make the decisions which you think is best for the team, best for you, best for your team, obviously put your team first before you, you're not really going to fail. Unless you're a complete and utter douchebag, it's actually really hard to fail at leadership. If you just use this simple rule, push. It's from the book, Pete Plaber. Put the mission first, the mission, the enemy, right? Put them in that priority order. Put the mission first, then next comes the men, which is your team, right? The people who you're in charge of, you're conducting leadership for. And then very last is, do you put yourself that you were last in that priority order? If you just follow that kind of guideline, you're going to do well in leadership, regardless if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Yeah, I think you're right, but they often try to make you learn another one if you could squeeze you in. Well, that's true, right? You can't say I'm wrong, right? And plus, the language portion of the Q course is not too bad, right? You just get to go to, it's kind of especially if you start learning learning languages can be fun. How can someone who's introverted or even with a cool social anxiety take? Oh, we already answered that question. All right. Army only service without jets, so best pilots are helo. All right. All right. We're going to get back into this. I'm going to come back to it. All right. We're getting a little off track. All right. I'll come back to your questions a little bit. All right. So next one is your MARSOC and your MARSOC raters. All right. So for anybody who doesn't know, MARSOC raters are basically the Marine Special Operations, but they're closest in capability to Green Berets. So think of Marine Green Berets, if you will. And you also have to remember that MARSOC selection is like one of the most of all our selections, our modern day selections, is one of the latest selections that was created. So BUDS and RASP are two of the oldest, right? And the special operations community has seen the advantages to the type of selections that are closer to like that tier 1 style, which is less yelling, more individual events. And MARSOC is definitely an example of this, kind of similar to SFAS. So MARSOC is a blend of infantry culture, recon style, amphibious capability, and SOCOM adaptability. And they have the same sort of mission, basically try to have the same capabilities as Green Berets, right? Obviously, they have not been doing as long. Green Berets have been around since, I think, late 50s, early 60s, I think, when they were created. I can't remember exactly when the first Special Forces unit was created, but it was obviously before Vietnam. So their assessment and selection comes in two different phases. Comes in phase 1 and phase 2, and they're both 3 weeks long. And the full MARSOC Raider pipeline extends much long afterwards. I think it's like 9 months or more. So it's a moderate to high pressure, physical stress, mental stress. They have water confidence. They have environmental challenges. And what they're looking for is water competency, adaptability, mental and physical toughness, team reliability, endurance, and mature professionalism. So their hardest events are you're going to notice this is sort of like MARSOC is kind of bringing some of the aspects of BUDS and some of the harder aspects of Army style selections together in one. So their hardest events is the water competency events. Wow, my brain damage is crushing me today, because they've got swim and tread tests, their endurance challenges, they've got land navigation, rucking events, and field events. So what makes it different? So MARSOC has a very strong amphibious component. It is not just land endurance. Candidates need to be comfortable in water. They need to have strong rucking ability and a maturity in team events. So how do you prepare for MARSOC? Kind of very similar to BUDS, is you need to be able to swim and tread water in a uniform with boots. Obviously, you should learn how to swim in a swimsuit, but also be able to do both, right? Swim in and out of uniform, if you will, and build that comfortability with holding your breath, being underwater, those stressful those situations. Know what it feels like to start running out of breath. Because that's really when your body starts to involuntarily panic for you. In learning how to keep yourself calm when your body's like, hey, I'm about to drown, is a skill that you have to learn through repetition. But difference between BUDS and MARSOC is MARSOC also rucks. So you also are going to learn how to ruck. So start that process, start early. I would recommend 6 months at least, train up prior to this. Leg strength, core and back, and then increase your endurance. You also want to build functional fitness. Just kind of goes just in general as be as physically fit as possible. And that way you are not a bed drop. You're not getting injured despite all these events. Be able to be a team player. Don't be a tool. Don't be a douchebag. Build endurance and adapt. Be able to adapt to changing conditions, right? And that's it's a common thing among all these selections is things are going to be thrown at you. And just when you think that you're done, they're going to throw something at you. So how quickly can you adapt to changing conditions is a very important skill. So MARSOC tests whether you can bring that kind of marine toughness with that more adaptive special operations environment. So, I can tell you, and I've talked about this in some different podcasts, when we do get a Marine who makes it through one of the tier 1 selections, they are almost always one of the most effective, not just effective, but the most successful operators we usually have. I talked to Brent about this. The same, all our Marines in ISA are awesome, and all the Marines in Delta just crush it. So if they can make it to that process, they can think outside the box. They got a special operator mindset, but they bring that sort of Marine grit and toughness. They're going to be a great operator. I'll tell you that right now. All right, let's go back to some questions. Let's see. I want to learn Arabic. Arabic's not a bad language. There's a lot of dialects. That's the problem with Arabic. There's so many dialects and they're so different. If you want an easy language that's kind of light Arabic, Farsi. I'm telling you, it's like Arabic light, way easier, no gender, grammar, much easier. And it's Indo-European, just written in Arabic text, which is pretty easy to learn. All right. I'm close to 32. Is it possible to get an age waiver to go to SFAS? Rucking needs work, but I have experience there. Actually, I don't even think at 32, I don't even think you need an age waiver. If you do, you can definitely get it, because I know people going into SFAS in the late 30s. So the Hillen, all right. Let's see here. All right. I love languages. Can you move your face cam? Yes. So now that we're done with MARSOC, I'm going to move it. Boom. Look at that. Magic. All right. So, I prepared for this. Crazy, right? All right. So let's see here. 10th group was started. See, there you go. Frank coming in with the information, coming in with the facts. Let's see. How did you deal with selection process and what did you do to cope? The easiest way, Corey Ferguson, how to deal with selection. All right. A lot of things are going to be thrown at you, and obviously physically prepare yourself. But once you're there, right, there's not much more you can do. You've done whatever you can to physically prepare yourself. At that point, most of selection is mental toughness, right? And these are the things that get most people. One is by concentrating on the length of selection. Like, oh my God, I've got so much longer to be here, right? That just adds all these different things. Like if you want to be successful, and the easiest way to make yourself as mentally tough and to sort of make it easier for you is to concentrate on the here and now, right? And I mean this in a couple different ways, right? Is if you're in an event, concentrate only on that event, right? Concentrate on the next step that you're going to take, one foot in front of the other, right? And you can even break this down inside of the events. Like if, for example, if you're in buds and you're lifting the log over your shoulder, don't think about how much longer you're going to be lifting this stupid log, right? Or the boat. Think about, okay, I just need to get to the next rep. Okay, that rep is done. All right, how we're going to move it from one shoulder to the other, right? Just think about how you get from one thing to the next. Do one step at a time. If you're doing a long land navigation movement, do not think about the point after the one that you're on. Think about the point that you're on, like where you're trying to go. Don't think about the entire land nav course. Think about only the point that you're on. If you do that and you take it day by day and don't worry about how long selection is, that is how you deal with the mental stresses of selection. Just one foot in front of the other, one event at a time, and that's it. And just do that. And honestly, it will go by quicker than you think it is. Don't worry about when things are going to end. And depending on what selection you go to, you actually may not know when it's going to end, right? Some of these selections have a specific number of days, right? But when you go to the tier 1 selections, they don't have specific number of days. You actually don't know when it's going to end, and it's designed like that for a reason. How much do you think your age played into you getting selected for TFO? What do you think the average was on the teams? So I was actually, John W., I was actually very young for ISA. So I went to ISA selection, I believe, when I was 26, and I think I passed OTC when I was 27. And my youth, right, because the average age of an operator at ISA or Delta is in the 30s. So definitely my youth was actually more of a concern because they obviously want really mature operators. But luckily I was able to prove that I was at least demonstrate that I had the capability to be very mature for my age. But it was definitely something that was brought up in my final board at OTC. And obviously I handled it pretty well because I ended up getting selected and made a full-fledged unit member after that board. Alex Moen, yes, 25-meter target, not the 1,000-meter target. Yep, just and that's life. Honestly, this is a sort of like a metaphor for life. Just worry about the only things that you can control are the things that you're doing right now, right? If you're worrying about the future, that's anxiety. If you're worrying about the past, that's depression, right? The only thing you can control right now is the here and there, right? That's what Marcus Aurelius says. Don't worry about anything you can't control. Worry about the only thing that you can, which is the present. All right. We can't forget our Air Force boys, our AFSOC. All right. So AFSOC has a bit of a shared selection, right? Kind of like, well, you can draw some parallels to like how SFAS, you go there and then obviously you're going to have 18 Bravos, 18 Charlies, 18 Deltas, 18 Echoes when they eventually go to the Q course, right? But there's a little bit broader because a lot of these guys, your PJs, your CCTs, your TAC-Ps, your STO and your CROWs are your officers. So PJs, correct me if I'm wrong, right? PJ is your parajumper, right? It's your that's essentially that's your rescue medic, right? Probably your like lone 18 Delta jumping out, basically saving pilots and other people, right? Your CCT and your TAC-P are your air controller, close air support. They're the ones who are usually embedded with special operations teams like Green Berets, Rangers, MARSOC. They're definitely augments. And then your SR is your special reconnaissance. Your STO and your CRO are your officers. All right. So they actually all share, they all kind of go to the same selection. And then once they're done through passing selection, then that's when they sort of get them distributed to their other specific jobs. So there is a prep course that is often went to. I believe that it is possible to skip the prep course. I don't know for sure because remember, so obviously I didn't go through Air Force Special Operations selection, but I do know a number of friends who did. And so this is secondhand information that they told me in preparation for this live. So I took some notes, if you will. So, said the prep course is often around 7 to 8 weeks. And assessment and selection is commonly discussed as about 4 weeks, depending on the specialty and the current structure. But like a lot of things, a lot of these things change over time. So they definitely have less yelling than buds, and it's more performance-based pressure. There's technical stress because a lot of these things, especially air controllers and stuff, there's a lot more going on than just your physical stuff. Communication under fatigue is huge because the Air Force have to communicate with aircraft, right? So you have to do all this while communicating, and the issues that anybody who's ever been a radio guy, who's ever had to establish communications, when you understand the RF environment and how communications work, there is an additional level of stress of trying to not only establish communications, but maintain them, right? That's a whole nother level of stress. And obviously, because the Air Force has to go everywhere where every other special operations go, they basically have to plan to go with Marines, Rangers, Navy SEALs. So not only they have to learn every infiltration method, and because SEALs and MARSOC are going in the water, guess what? AFSOC needs to go in the water. So you also need to build that water confidence, underwater. So they have their grass drills, their guerrilla drills, their team tasks, their individual evaluations, and also their rucking endurance events because, they're going places with the Army. So they need to learn how to ruck. All right. Next. So let's get into some of their events. Well, first of all, let's talk about what they're looking for. So they're looking for technical ability, communication. All right. Air Force, got to be able to communicate. Problem solving, emotional control, team reliability, and the ability to operate under pressure. Because usually if you need Air Force guys, whether it's close air support, your TAC-Ps, your CCTs, or your PJs, usually something has went wrong, right? And I'll tell you, like when you're on a team, an SF team or any other type of team, and you've got your Air Force guys, like your CCTs and your TAC-Ps, they're not doing much, right? When things are going good. But when things go bad, they are your best friends. There is no important member on the team than your CCT and your TAC-P. And if you're someone who needs to be rescued, whether you're a pilot or you're just a team stuck behind, there's no better friend than a PJ, right? So there's a common theme here, right? So because their job comes in handy, all right, you don't call in close air support unless you are in a really big firefight and you need it, right? Like things are going down. So Air Force guys, their job only exists under pressure. So they definitely need to do that. Like they definitely needs to be a skill that they need to the ability to perform under pressure. So, all right, hardest events is the water confidence and their underwater training events, their grass drills, their guerrilla drills, their team task. They also have pretty intense individual evaluations, and they also have rucking endurance events, as like we talked about. So the water confidence event is a major stressor, as you've sort of noticed the theme between MARSOC and BUDS. So they're going to do buddy breathing. They have to do bobbing. They do treading, mask and snorkel recovery, surface swims, and pool competency exposes panic pretty quickly. So all these events I just talked about are pretty much all of them are also in the MARSOC selection and also BUDS as well. So like I said, for those ones, be competent, basically get used to the involuntary panic your body causes you from basically near drowning. So you can practice this in a pool. Grass and guerrilla drills. These are physically exhausting movement and team events, and they test not only your team sort of capabilities, but also your team communications. And they also test your level of effort and your emotional control and the ability to keep performing under pressure and when you're tired. And essentially, because you're going to be getting smoked this entire time. So can you conduct these tasks while basically getting your shit pushed in? So preparation tips, very similar to BUDS and MARSOC. Get in the pool, learn how to swim, become comfortable with it, both above water and over water. Do it in a swimsuit, basically in and out of uniform, practice both, and build that water confidence. Learn how to, get better at your breath holds, know what it feels like, not only to run out of air, but also exerting yourself while you're running out of air. They also need to learn how to ruck, so build that leg, build that legs, build that back, build that core, build your endurance, build your VO2 max, build your work capacity, but learn how to communicate, right? So anybody who, especially when you're dealing with aircraft, you need to be precise in your language, right? So even when you're tired, Air Force people, and this actually works for everybody, right? Like if you're in communications, you're talking to anybody, you definitely want to be precise in your communications, even if you're tired and you're under stress. This is also a skill that is really hard to replicate, but they try to do this under stress environments. And that's how they're able to, as much as they can, replicate the characteristics of a stressful environment that you'll find in combat. So you need to learn how to communicate under stress and under pressure and solve problems while you're suffering, while stuff is going bad, right? This is the tenets of special operations. It's the military in general, but specifically special operations, because usually you're a small number of people, probably going to be outnumbered, doing putting yourself in high risk situations. So, all right, let's get some questions. Dark Wizzy Wizard, you were great, buddy. Good youngling in Spec Ops world. Thank man, I appreciate that. How important is spiritual discipline going into these selections? It depends, Fallen Angel, about what you mean spiritual discipline. There's different types of spiritual discipline. You got your Buddhists, you got your religious people. I think actually you find surprising, if you're in the special operations, you actually find a lot of agnostic people. So, but that doesn't mean you can't still be spiritual, right? Whatever your spiritual beliefs are, regardless what you believe in, you can use them to reinforce whatever you're doing and sort of give yourself strength. So if you've got some good spiritual discipline, and I'm using this as a broad term, you can use it to aid you if you use it properly and you frame it properly. So I hope that answers your question. If you could rewind on the clock, would you serve in the same unit as you did? What would be the perfect career have you looked for? So that's a great question, John W. 1958. So I went to ISA because that's just kind of like, I got approached about going to ISA, and I was already kind of struggling because I was still trying to get my waiver to go to SFAS, and because I don't have a spleen, that wasn't really happening. So I ended up going. But I will tell you that I ended up being, for a lot of people who know, I ended up being the tactical detachment of ISA. So I spent most of my time with both Delta and SEAL Team 6, and I found that I had a personality that meshed better with Delta and SEAL Team 6, specifically Delta. And then I actually end up getting a personal invitation to end up going to Delta operator selection, um, which was to me was a such a compliment that these guys liked me so much that they're like, "Hey, come be one of us." So if I could go back in hindsight, there is definitely a thought, right, of maybe I would have done Delta instead, knowing what I know now, just because I was probably closer in personality. But the very unique nature of ISA has definitely given me a different outlook on life that I probably wouldn't have had if I went to Delta. And because it's so intelligence discipline oriented, I probably I don't know how to put this in the right way. I probably intellectually challenged myself a lot more and I probably have much broader intellectual and philosophical views because of the fact that I went to ISA. So there's probably a pro and con to both. And obviously also remember, everything seems like it's greener. The grass is greener on the other side. And look, I'm definitely not gonna live in regret. It's what happened. It's what I did. I enjoyed my time, but I definitely think I mesh better with Delta. So that would definitely have been a consideration of what I know now. Where did I get this graph? Where can I get this graphic? Well, I'm glad you like it so much. I created it with the help of AI. But I could probably give you guys this. I actually could probably put it on my page somehow. I'll probably put it on like my Instagram or something like that. Which one did you say is the best at making or finding great soldiers, or like which one is the most effective at making a special ops soldier? They're all decent at it. Each one tries to find a different type of special operations soldier, right? I think the Green Berets are good because they have a different type of mission. Both MARSOC Raiders and Green Berets have a different type of mission than Navy SEALs and Rangers do, right? Navy SEALs and Rangers are more direct action. MARSOC Raiders and Green Beret are more about FID, which is foreign internal defense, basically jumping behind enemy lines, creating your own little miniature army, your own little revolution, and then causing ruckus behind enemy lines. And then the tier 1 units are looking for completely different things. Also, which one is the most rounded training? Like, which one covers the most ground? What types of training? I would definitely. So the Green Berets are probably the most well-rounded, right? SEALs and Rangers are very direct action oriented. Green Berets still need to learn direct action, but they also need to learn how to be completely independent of a larger command. And so their teams are designed to basically have every type of skill that you may need behind enemy lines and basically be able to do, they're probably one of the most self-sufficient without needing any sort of support, even probably among tier 1, because tier 1 is very support heavy. Like you're doing your missions and stuff like that. There's a different case for ISA operatives when they're deployed, but Green Berets are probably and by association, just because of a similar mission, MARSOC Raiders, but they are the most well-rounded of all special operations. They do pretty much every job because they have to. They're by themselves. That's the nature of their mission. AFSOC were very academically acute, like SF 18 Delta and 18 Echo or smarter MOS. PJ have medical stuff and CCT radio, aerial ACT. Yeah, it's a bit off topic, but which special operations from an Op 4 country do you think are the most effective? Well, it depends on what you consider an Op 4. Like, obviously, are we considering countries that normally we're at war with, like the Spetsnaz and stuff like that? I would probably say the most fearful of all countries that we might go against, because you don't really have to worry about going against the Australian SAS or the British SAS, probably the Spetsnaz. I don't really want to get into the Israel debate because that's neither here nor there. Can we have access to this background graphic? Absolutely. Since you are now the second person, what is a no-win situation in Delta selection? Never encountered that. All right. So I can't give you a specific of what, and we're going to get into this into the no-win situations, right? Actually, let me get into it when I get into that portion of the no-win situations. Yeah. Russia, China, and currently SW6. Okay. Currently a SWIC student, 18x hold, swap C in selection this fall. Really appreciate your stuff. Thanks for all your info. Alex Moen, man, I appreciate you, brother. Good luck, man. Just go at it. Just don't quit. And just you got this, brother. Did you work with Rob O'Neill? I did not personally. I did work with Brent Tucker. We were actually on a mission together in Iraq, or not Iraq, but actually Africa. We actually did a mission together. What can you say about 35 mics assigned to group? Can you expect a more field-focused job similar to 35 Pause and Sade, or is it desk usually more admin, reports, desk, and Fox work? Yeah, unfortunately, 35 mics, correct me wrong, it's your HUMIT, and I think they're about to bring in CI guys into that same thing, but your HUMIT guys, the HUMIT world is a little bit different. There's a pecking order of HUMIT and how that works. So it starts with CIA train. So remember, NSA sort of runs SIGINT. They make the policies SIGINTs. CIA runs HUMIT, right? They're the one in charge. While the other organizations have HUMIT abilities, it's kind of the CIA is in charge of it. They write all the policies, everything like that, like the NSA does SIGINT. How people get sources and get things, it goes in a pecking order. So everything starts with CIA case officers, right? They get their first pick of any sources, right? Then after that comes tier 1 farm trained case officers, right? Which is the farm, anybody who knows, is the sort of training. It's like a 6-month training course that basically certifies you that you can basically run sources for essentially the CIA. So they got tier 1 guys who are farm trained. They're next in the pecking order. Then you get your tier 2 guys, and that's usually like your 18 Foxes and your Green Berets on his team, who are your AFSOC level 1 through level 3 guys who are trained at a certain level. There's obviously additional training in the SF pipeline for human related things, but they get the next, right? So you're at your tier 2 human trained guys. And then even if you are a 35 mic at group, they just still consider you, like, you might get a source before a regular Army 35 mic will, but I can tell you, unless we're in wartime, like Iraq and Afghanistan war, like the tier 2 guys are not even really getting sources, right? And so unfortunately, as a 35 mic and group, yeah, you're going to be more to a desk job. That's how it was when I was there. Granted, I have not been there in a while, but I don't think much has changed in that department. 35 mics, unfortunately, if you're a 35 mic, if I have any advice for you, continue going. Try to go past group. Try to either get into some sort of intelligence agency or get into a tier 1 unit, and then you'll have a different story. What was your struggle there? How to overcome it? Oh, my English is not bad. SF, can you do multiple mission sets or focus teams? No, so SF has pretty much they're like the Swiss Army knife. They have multiple different mission sets. They have a much broader mission set than the Rangers and the Navy SEALs do. I agree. SF is rounded, maintain every capability, and adapt to the conflict, war, etc. Apparently, the NSDP in Antarctica is most feared units according to the internet. Jean-Pierre, $10, brother. I appreciate you, Jean-Pierre. Do you think you would have been happier doing intelligence for D, or ISA provides you a more elite, well-rounded intel experience, or maybe even being a career 18 series guy? I definitely think that I would rather have been an ISA operator than just to been a Green Beret at an intel guy, or be like an 18 Fox or whatever, just because like there is a reason why it's a tier 1 organization, and they definitely have a level of funding, a level of access, right? Doing intel at the Delta's intel squadron is definitely like something that is another capability. But if you are focused on intel, it is hard to recreate the what you get to do at ISA, even at Delta, right? There is some sort of similar stuff that goes on, but the overall environment at Delta and the people and the personalities is a lot better of an environment. And I think Delta, just in general, is a better run organization. ISA is plagued by a number of different things that, while it is a very unique organization, some of those very unique aspects of the organization also hold it back at the same time in certain levels of effectiveness. And then also at the same time, they're doing a job that is also like, they're kind of like, so imagine if you were to take CIA agents and then obviously make them a lot more tactically proficient. That's typically the best way to describe an ISA guy. It's your amalgamation of a Delta and a CIA officer, and then you put something like in between, right? Maybe not, they're not as tactically proficient as Delta, definitely still more tactically proficient than above tier 2 direct action units, but then also have that capability. And it's, you're kind of like, you have so many different jobs because usually you're by yourself or you're in like 2 to 3 man teams at the most. And so you have to be very self-sufficient. And so you're kind of like also a bit of you're like an SF team, but you're like a lone SF team. You're a individual Swiss Army knife. You have to be able to do all these different things. You have to be tactical professional. You have to run sources. You have to do intelligence, and then all do this while under covert and clandestine things. So it's a very unique mission set. But some of the personalities that come along with it, just ISA is just not as well run of an organization as Delta is, but I would still take ISA over any tier 2 unit any day. Nice. I drink Brent's coffee. Thank you, Dark Wizzy Wizard. Thank you, Bear. Appreciate the 279. ASOT. It's advanced special operations techniques. This is the AFO mission stuff. I'm getting my aerospace engineering degree. Should I try to fly helos for the Army? It depends. So here's a way to look at it, right? I think helicopters are a great way to start because all helicopter pilots can easily transition to fly airplanes because you actually have to learn how to fly your helicopter like an airplane. Airplane pilots coming to helicopters is actually a harder transition because it's not the same skill set. But at the end of the day, learning how to fly, basically learning how to fly helicopters is like learning how to fly, but in hard mode. Flying, if you just go straight to airplanes, it's easy mode, right? That's why it's an easier transition from helicopters to airplanes because you're like, oh, wow, I get to fly easy mode now. Frank, my prep is going well. 3 runs, 2 days. Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate all of you, Frank, everybody. All right. So let's get back into it. All right. Now we're getting into the tier 1 selections. All right. And some of you may be asking, why is ISA and Delta put together? So for anybody who doesn't know, that ISA was created afterwards, after the Iran hostage crisis failure, Operation Equal Claw. And one of the reasons why it was created is because we saw that we had a capability gap because the military had a horrible relationship with the CIA and wouldn't cooperate. So the Army decided to create its own version of the CIA, which is essentially the ISA. But the ISA is now amalgamation of sort of like the CIA, the NSA, DIA. Pretty much every intelligence discipline is performed by operators within the ISA. So Delta sort of started its selection process, its OTC, and learned that from the British SAS. Because that's where Colonel Jerry Beckwith. Well, ISA saw Delta, and the creator of ISA was a man named Colonel Jerry King. And Colonel Jerry King decided to clone almost everything off of Delta to include the unit structure, which obviously collides squadrons and troops, but they also clone selection. Their selection is located in a different part of the country. It's in a different landscape ecosystem. And majority of the things are similar, but they did change a few things, right? So their selections are very similar. So the things that they focus on is solo stuff. And it's so almost everything is you are isolated, you are by yourself. So they are looking, so the themes of it is that they self-isolation, and there is zero feedback. You don't get any positive reinforcement. You don't get any negative enforcement. The only time that you hear words uttered out of the cadre's mouths is they are giving instructions once. As soon as they are done, you will not hear anything come outside of their mouth. They will stand there and just look at you. And if you ask them a single question, they will always respond with, "Candidate, what were your instructions?" That is it. If you do awesome, they won't say a word. They won't even move a face muscle. If you do anything wrong, not going to say anything, not going to move a single face muscle, right? I'm telling you, like you get nothing, right? The only reason that you even know that you've passed is at the end of the final event, they're going to tell you, hey, and for both selections, the final event is a board. They're going to tell you, hey, we're going to take a chance on you. You get to go to the next step of evolution, which is OTC for both ISA, and because each one has their own OTC, which stands for Operator Training Course. The only reason you know that you failed is that when you go up, you're going to be randomly called whatever your pseudonyms are, right? It's slightly different between ISA and Delta. If you get told you're put into a truck, you're going to get in a truck probably by yourself, and then you're going to get taken off into a building. They're going to come in, you're going to walk in, and they're going to say, hey, you're done. You didn't make it. They won't tell you, you might have an idea of what you did. They're not really going to get too much into it. You failed a time standard or you did something else, but they're just basically going to tell you, hey, thank you for trying. Thank you for coming out, and good luck to you for the rest of your career. And that's it. And you're gone. Right. And because you're in pseudonyms, the rest of your class will never see you again. Right. Because for many different reasons. So their selection is typically 5 to 6 weeks, right? So you actually don't know when it's going to end. And there's a reason for that. That goes into sort of the mental, the stresses that because when they design the selection, right? Charlie Beckwith, when he was creating Delta selection, brought in like psychologists, and they're like, this is what we need to find. What is the most psychologically stressful environment that we can come up with, right? And so instead of doing something like the Navy SEALs BUDS, they came up with this. And this quickly reaffirmed that this is way more psychologically stressful than the other options. So the stress style, you are completely isolated, right? There is like one event for like 2 or 3 days, right? Or a couple days. It's slightly different between Delta and ISA. You don't do anything with anybody else. You're completely isolated. It's solo the entire basically 5 to 6 weeks. You get no feedback, and because you are by yourself and you get no feedback, the level of uncertainty is through the roof because you don't know, right? At any one point, an instructor could be like, hey, come over here. You're basically in whisk you away and now you're done, right? Like that screws with people, right? So, and then it's mentally draining. It's very ambiguous. There is absolutely no clear path and extreme performance standards, which you don't know the performance standards. They just tell you whenever they tell you an event, especially if it's an endurance or physical event, they say, candidates, go as fast as you can, do the best that you can. And that's it, right? The only reason you know that you didn't pass the time standard is if you get kicked out. That's it, right? So that is a whole nother level of stress that unless you've went through it, like if you went through RASP or BUDS, it's a huge stark difference, and it screws with people more than people think. It's actually probably there's a reason why they designed it like this. So what are they looking for, right? All tier 1 units, they are looking for probably the number one thing is problem solving. And not only but problem solving, but like self-confidence, self-reliance, because obviously in best case scenarios, right, you're in a small team, right? But even when you're in a small team, a lot of these teams get separated and you have to be able to operate independently. So they need you to be a problem solver and you to be extremely self-reliant and self-confident and initiative. But then also because you are the tip of the spear and you are allowed to make battlefield basically decisions on the fly, you have to have extreme level of accountability. And you have to understand the weight of your decisions. And so the ability to operate independently, the ability to handle uncertainty, because like that's the operational environment, especially when you're at this tier level, you're out there, like there's nobody else, like you're not coming in behind anybody else, you're first one out. So that level of uncertainty is higher than anything because you're usually, especially if you're ISA guys, like you're the one who's gathering the intelligence. So you may not know what's going on at all. And because of this, all these different things, this level of reliance and problem solving, it requires a level of high intelligence, right? There's a lot of shooters out there, the tier 2 level that struggle with this, right? I'm not calling anybody dumb or retarded, but it definitely requires a level of intelligence. And what I think that I heard a quote the other day, I think some general or might have even paid headset or something like that, said that we basically need rocket scientists who can like shoot people, right? And honestly, that's what they're trying to look for, right? Obviously, we're not going to exactly find that, but that's what they're trying to go. They're trying to go through those extremely intelligent people who can shoot people, who can, perform violence when needed to, but also, maybe launch some rockets into space. So, your John Rambo meets Elon Musk. That's the dream. Are they going to get that? No, but you're going to try to get as close as you can. And then a big portion of this, which I think often gets overlooked, is a level of emotional control, because stuff is going to happen. And the only thing that when stuff goes really, really bad, the only thing that can screw you more than whatever the situation is already doing to you is for you to lose your cool. And so emotional regulation and emotional control are vital to these situations, because a lot of times you're going to be in like really bad situations because that's the nature of this particular job and this particular level of the special operations at the tier 1 level. So there's a lot of similarities. So both selections concentrate heavily on self-reliance. You are most completely solo for much of the process, and you get little to no feedback. You often do not know what you're doing. You don't know how long you're going to be doing for, and you have no idea when the next evolution of training is going to come because they surprise you every single time. So, because a lot of people rely on feedback to keep performing. In this selection, feedback never comes. All right. So before we go into the specifics, let's answer some questions. Army aviation is riskier bet right now. No, seems like they got their priorities on US. Army aviation? No, like as a matter of fact, there's helicopters are not going away anytime soon. Actually, the one good thing is helicopters, we are getting I forget what it's the MV-75 or whatever the new helicopter. It was the V2 Valor 280. What is it, the MV-75? That's going to replace the Black Hawk. It was supposed to replace the Apache too, because it's modular. So the MV-75. So it's basically like an Osprey, like a more advanced version, but the Osprey is more of an airplane that has helicopter capabilities. This is more of a helicopter that has airplane capabilities, right? If that makes any sense. The problem with helicopters is they weren't meant to fly. So it's good that we're actually transitioning to tilt rotor aircraft, because I can tell you having more natural airplane characteristics is better for safety overall. If you understand aerodynamics and just physics, you'll understand why helicopters are so unsafe. Yes, helo to plane is much easier. So, like I said, like when you're actually learning how to fly a helicopter, you actually have to learn how to land it like an airplane, and that has to do with weight, because when you're flying a helicopter, when you're using power, the most amount of power, the most strain that you're putting on your engines, like if you're pushing your engines to 100%, you use majority of your engine power during takeoff and landing and hovering. Like you'll be using like 90%. But when you're actually at altitude and you're cruising, you'll use like 20-30%. So let's just say that you lose an engine, you have now lost half your power. Well, if you have so much weight on you, you may no longer have enough power to go to a hover, because that requires more power. So what you have to learn how to do is land it like an airplane. So that's one of the reasons why that one, you already learned kind of like those processes, and also just flying a helicopter is just so much harder than an airplane. But you have to understand all the characteristics of physics and aerodynamics that go into learning how to fly an airplane, and that go into, but also into helicopter. But you have to know them even more because they're more critical in the flight profiles of rotary wing aircraft, if you will. Plus the fact that reserves got rid of all their copters. Yeah, I don't remember. I think it's just National Guard. Yeah. You did say you were cadre at one point. How did you guys differentiate between choosing the best person and the right person? Currently applying for an SMU enabler. Sorry, just got on the live. Past the service. Yes. For anybody who doesn't know, I got to about 4 years into my time at ISA. I actually got to be a cadre at ISA, and still one of the coolest jobs I ever got to do at the unit. Like I got to do a lot of cool stuff, but being cadre at a tier 1 selection, cool as fuck. So what we are looking for, right? Like I said, we're looking at problem solvers, right? We're looking at people who are extremely self-reliant, self-confident, right? But you need adaptability. You need people who are like, we put you in the middle of some really crazy situations. Like you've seen all the movies and shows. The tier 1 selections, Delta and ISA, have some of the most unique events, especially ISA, because ISA actually added, like, for example, Delta is a little bit more physically demanding because they have the long walk, right? Also their selection is harder physically for 2 reasons. One, they do their ruck movements, especially their final movement, which is over 40 miles, is about 40 miles. Not only is it longer than ISA's, which is slightly shorter, it's in way worse terrain, right? And we're not going to tell you where ISA's selection is, but it's a completely different part of the country. And I know this because part of ISA's OTC, our tactical portion of our training, is actually in the location where, at the exact place that Delta actually does their selection. So we actually have to run their land nav lanes that they run during selection. So I know this personally. It's the hardest land nav I've ever seen. If you've ever been in the brambles of West Virginia, and I know some people are like, oh, you're giving away. No, you can look up on Google where Delta's selection is. It's the fact that they have to move much longer distance. They have to move longer distance, but they have to do it in way worse terrain. Definitely makes their selection harder from a physical standpoint of view. Ours, we added a couple very unique events that are extremely psychologically and intellectually harder, right? So if I had to say it, right, Delta's a little bit more, is physically more challenging. ISA's is probably some more intellectually challenging, if you will. But both of them are very, very similar. So going back to the question about me being cadre. So you get put into these these situations where, and then actually I'll lead this into it. You're going to get put into no-win situations, right? And I'm not going to get into any like what they are specifically. Just know they are no-win situations. Basically, you're going to be put in a situation where they're going to want you to analyze what's going on. You then need to make a decision based off the information that you get. You need to make the best case decision based off of what you see in front of you, and you have to do it in a timely way because you can't sit there and analyze forever. You then have to make a decision, but I can tell you every decision that you make, it's wrong, right? So what they're looking for, right, is one, how quickly can you analyze the situation? So they're going to evaluate that. Then they're going to evaluate what decision you ended up making, because there is no right decision. They're all wrong. Why you evaluated, why you ended up making that decision. And then, and this is the most important part that screws everybody up, whatever decision you make, follow it through. Don't question it, right? Because where people get messed up and where we really get people is once you put them in basically like, oh, you've made the wrong decision, they will go back. Even though they believe that they know that it's wrong, they will go back on it. So, and these are really, really hard situations. So that is also testing another level of your confidence, your mental fortitude, right? And like because that, and you have to think about it, like, why is it doing like this, right? Because you're going to be, especially like at the tier where you're in situations where you're going to be in a situation where no matter what situation you get, you make a decision. Like, let's just say that you're caught behind enemy lines, you're ambushed, you're surrounded, your cover has been blown, right? When you're in these bad situations, every decision you make is going to be a bad one, right? Every decision is probably going to have negative consequences, but you still have to make a decision. And so it puts you in these type of situations to see what you would do, even if every situation is bad. Which one do you believe is the least bad, or which one that has the least amount of consequences? So this allows them to evaluate something that probably no other selection allows them to evaluate. It's probably one of the most unique portions of it. And then it ends with a board. And these are constantly known as hostile boards or murder boards. These are not nice boards. These are not like your boards that you go for in the military when you're getting promoted. They are nothing like that. All right. They are, and I know that some of you may not think that, like, oh, that doesn't sound that bad. Trust me, it's way worse than you ever think it is. To the point where I actually thought my hostile board was the hardest event at selection. That's how bad it was. All right. Let's do some questions. How good is IS-8 human and undercover ops? What's the difference between ground branch and 18 Fox? Well, I wouldn't even really put 18 Fox in the same category, right? Because 18 Fox is doing human from an SF level type of mission. They're not really doing things clandestine. The closest, not doing anything clandestine or covertly. They're not really going on operations and civilian. They're doing it in whatever capacity that their SF team is operating in, right? The closer organizations who would probably be doing something similar is either your guys at Delta in the intelligence squadron or your ground branch, right? So your ground branch, with it is a CIA, it's their paramilitary, kind of like when people think of like the CIA Black Ops, that's basically what people think is like that's ground branch, right? They're probably very similar, but the difference is the authorities, because the CIA, the ISA still falls under the authorities of the Department of Defense. The CIA does not, right? They fall under their own authorities. So this has been used before, actually, to our advantage. When actually the ISA rebuilt its relationship with the CIA, they actually started doing operations with the CIA because we had different authorities, and we would actually use each other to actually do get around each other's limit of their authorities, right? If there was something that they couldn't do, there was a chance that we might be able to do it because our authorities allowed us, versus and vice versa. So we actually ended up being because one, we're sort of designed after them anyways, and we're actually kind of very similar to way that, not exactly, but it's different, but it's probably closest to ground branch, if you will. And so a lot of people, especially the guys who are in the tactical detachment of ISA, a lot of them would end up going to ground branch. This is actually a pretty easy transition. How do you get good at navigation, Stoic Viking? Do one. So if anybody wants to go, there are companies that now run navigation courses in West Virginia. If you ever want to get really good at land nav, like if you literally type in Delta Force land navigation training, actually, let me pull it up right now. Actually, I know. Hold on a second. We're looking this up. All right, True North. Like there's actually a couple of these, right? So I'm going to remove this, add to stage. Did I add the wrong one? Oh, give me 1 second. Sorry. Remove. All right, sorry. Huh. Sorry. All right, let me add this back while I do. Okay. So apparently I didn't add this properly. So share screen. All right, found it. All right. If you guys want to ever learn land nav at its hardest point, because there is no harder land nav than Delta selection in West Virginia, you can go to Tier 1 True North, and they do a Tier 1 navigation development course, which basically, as you can see, they teach you how to do land nav in West Virginia. That's, if you can pay it, right? Obviously, there's no better training than this, because it is I've done land nav of pretty much most Army bases. This is by far the worst land nav in the United States. You have to use, like, the brambles of West Virginia are unforgiving. You have to use terrain association. Yeah, this is the best way to do it. If you want to do it the hardest. That's my personal experience. So, all right. Let's see here. So, LaDiamond, I hope that answered your question. What Tier 1 group are you in? I was in ISA, but I was in the tactical detachment, so I actually got to work with both Delta and SEAL Team 6. So I was actually able to get to see the inside of all three, which I could tell you the differences from an organization and atmospherics point of view. Alessandra Griffith coming in with a 999. Well, I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate this, by the way. Character flaws in candidates are a huge hindrance. Egotistical fools are not good. Yes, Dark Wizzy Wizard. I will tell you this right now. We, especially at the Tier 1 level as a cadre, there were so many high performers. If we see that you are some sort of a prima donna and you have a level of ego, we will actually kick you out for just having an ego, or basically being a prima donna. Like, if you think that your shit doesn't stink, that's a problem. And I'll tell you why, right? You're like, oh, if this guy's so good. No, because eventually, if you think that if you have an ego, you are harder to teach. And what we're testing in selection is not what you're learning in the unit, right? And people who have egos are the hardest people to teach, right? You need to know have this concept. You don't know what you don't know, right? That you're yearning to know more, because if you're someone who thinks they know a lot, trust me, you're going to be more of a hindrance to yourself when it comes to learning new techniques than you win as somebody who just accepts, like, hey, I'm on this journey just to just soak in everything, you know. So that's definitely a bit of an issue. How does ISA maintain the difficulty of selection when they assess both men and women? Are the standards mostly physically different? So everybody, their standards are different, right? So women are assessed for their standards among women, and then there's men. Nobody knows the standards. So if you are a cadre, right, and you're watching the candidates and you see what times they come in, and if a female candidate comes in under the female time, then she's kicked out. If the males come in out of the time, then he's kicked out, right? You never know your times anyways. So you have no idea, but the cadre know. And that's why they're able to, like, they know the times of everybody, and then they will basically kick people out if you don't make the times. So that's how they're able to do it. So do you guys get any California CA guys, right? So what does CA stand? So I already know what this comment. So Flo, once again, appreciate the $10. Do you guys get any CA guys? 4-man team, less visible. I think Uriah Pop was a CA. Is that Civil Affairs? Who won SMU? I actually know Uriah Pop. Uriah Pope, actually, I actually worked with him for years. If anybody doesn't know who Uriah Pope is, like, he was I think he was a former 18 Delta. He was definitely a medic, right? And he came to the SMU. Uriah is an awesome dude. Like, probably one of the nicest, coolest, most capable dudes that I met in ISA. So if anybody doesn't know who Uriah Pop is, I think I just saw him someone featured him I know he was on some podcasts recently, and then they were talking about him on the JSOC Reddit. Awesome dude. How do you handle losing to your greatest arch nemesis? Well, so for anybody who doesn't know, I have a lot of great arch nemesis in the world, and there's this guy, right? He's the worst. He's horrible. If you ever guys meet him, his name is Alex Jenkins, and if you ever see Alex Jenkins in the street, just punch him in the face, right? You'll just be really helpful to me, because unfortunately, he is my arch nemesis when it comes to polo, and one day I will beat him, right? But in the meantime, if you see him, just Alex Jenkins, just punch him in the face. Besides the physical aspect, what are some of the things I can do in my daily life to prepare for SFAS or selection in general? It really comes down to it's that mental aspect, right? How do you handle failure? How do you handle uncertainty? Are probably two of the biggest things, because that's really kind of what trips people up, is the uncertainty, and also your self-reliance, right? Because when you're in selection and you're on the star course, or you're by yourself and you don't have anybody else to rely on, you have to be extremely self-sufficient. You have to be extremely self-reliant, and there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. Your mind is going to come in and be like, hey, what if you're behind times? What if you're going to fail? What if you don't make this event, right? And that is the type of stuff that will crush you from what little motivation you might have, and like lead you down a path that may actually get you to actually fail that particular event. So putting yourself in situations where that create uncertainty and that you have to do things by yourself are probably two of the things that you can use to help to create that self-reliance, and that practice of dealing with situations where it's uncertain. What about if my arch nemesis is better looking than me? All right, if you guys are ever in a situation your arch nemesis is better looking than you, well, that just adds insult to injury. Just putting sand in the wound. Look, I'm not going to say any racist comments here, but we'll just leave it at that. Can you explain what ISA does and how they operate and how to join them? So nowadays you can actually go to the website. I think it's like something USASOC NCR. Basically, I think the recruiting is a website. NCR is basically what you're looking for. You can now apply online. It was different when I got recruited to go through selection. They didn't have a website at the time, but they do now. So you can definitely do that. But basically, it's the Army's version of the CIA, amalgamation of the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, but they operate probably closer in majority of the unit to the CIA. How did you maintain your body and not get injured? That's a good question, BMed. So basically, it's all about physical preparedness. So you want to be as good of shape as you can be prior to it, right? Because then the more in shape that you are, and the more stress that you put through your body, the less it's going to break down, right? Because it's going to break down, but like, are you in good enough shape that it doesn't you physically get injured? And then also, basically, if you outside of buds, right, take care of your feet, because your feet are everything in these selections, where it's basically you're moving, especially the tier 1 level, because you're doing land navigation movements every single day, and your feet are like the number one thing that's your number one tool right there. And if you do not learn how to take care of your feet, know how to powder your feet, how to keep them dry, how to change your socks while on the move, and practice these type of things, you're going to get injured. You are going to screw up your feet so bad that you're not going to be able to walk on them, and you're going to be medically dropped. So yeah, physically prepare your body and know how to take care of your feet. Did you find any hobbies after retirement from service? If it helps, it helps. Oh, yes, actually it did. So I actually started getting new hobbies. So basically, you got to think about what are the things that you've always wanted to do, and maybe some things you may not even know what to do. So, like, a big part of my life now is horses, and I play polo. And there's a guy who keeps coming in here, right? Is there's an account on here. It's called Military Equestrian Foundation. That is my arch nemesis, Alex Jenkins, and we play polo together. And learning how to getting into the world of horses, because mind you, nobody in my family has ever been around horses. When I got into polo, didn't even know how to ride horses. And when I originally got into polo, I actually got into it because I was a former college soccer player who was in his early 30s, and I couldn't relive my glory days. I knew I was getting older, and I wanted something else to do physically, but I also liked the glamour of the supposed glamour of getting into polo, but the girls, everything like that. But what I ended up falling in love with very quickly was especially when I started taking care of my own horses instead of paying other people to do it, was I fell in love with the horse aspect of it. And now it's my favorite part of it. And now I take care of my own horses. Alex Jenkins does do their shoes now, but I get to train the horses. I get to refine them. I get to ride them. And I work them every single day, and learning their personalities and how you do things. Because remember, in polo, anytime you do anything in polo, it's a team effort. It's tandem. And actually, if this horse is in more control of the situation than I am, so I'm on a horse that weighs 5 to 6 times more than I do, and I have to convince them to do what I want to do. Because at any point, if they don't want to do it, guess what? We're not doing it. So anytime that you score a goal, or you steal the ball from Alex Jenkins, you do it in tandem. It's teamwork with you and that particular horse. And that is definitely an exhilarating feeling and a feat of accomplishment. Not to mention just the emotional intelligence of horses is just extremely impressive. Plus, they have their own strong personalities. Each horse is different. What do you know about Great Skills Program? Is it similar to ISA? All right, yummy things. All right, I love when someone asks me a question about great skill. All right, first piece of advice: if you're thinking about great skill, stay far, far, far away. All right, great skill was probably somebody's good idea at once, but everybody that I know, and there's one slight exception, everybody that I know who has been to grade skill hates their life. It is the biggest disappointment of your life, right? One, they don't have the authorities to do anything that they claim that they're going to be do, right? So you'll go there and then you're supposed to be a secret organization. They go to work in uniform, right? And then they don't get to do the job that they were told that they get to do. And everybody who I've ever met at grade skill hates their life, right? The one exception to this is if you're a Hugh mentor, because the only one who actually gets to do their job and gets to do what they were is the human track. So if you're not somebody who's in the human track, because the human track actually believe that they actually will eventually send you to the farm. They actually, if you're enlisted, they'll make you a warrant officer, and it's actually a pretty decent track for a 35 mic. Anybody outside of that, do not go to grade skill. You will hate your life. You are going to be so disappointed, and you're just gonna, you're gonna hate life in general. They don't do anything. I've got many bad stories about grade skill because they want to be ISA, but one, they don't have the funding, they don't have the authorities, they don't have anything that they would need to even get close to what ISA does. Do you think with no prior land nav experience going into the Army with an option 40 BCT in the classroom time and RASP prepare me enough for the land nav or RASP? 11 Bravo, by the way. Absolutely, yeah. So a lot of these courses, even the tier 1 courses, they do land nav courses in selection, right? You're just better prepared if you've done it prior, right? I would definitely be very hard specifically for somebody who's never done land nav to go to Delta selection and navigate that course. But I think pretty much anything is going to doing RASP for your option 40, I think you'll be fine. They'll teach you plenty going through your processes of going through your option 40 contract. You'll definitely learn enough, and you'll be fine as long as if you can learn and you can adapt. You'll have enough courses to figure it out. Yeah, but at the end of the day, you can't go wrong with better preparation. So if you can get some sort of experience or some, what do you call it? That's the word I'm looking for. Just some, like, the basically you do the thing, like, be experience or exposure. If you do exposure, you can't go wrong. The more the better, right? Is there a certain level of experience in the military that you can recommend before attending a soft SMU selection? If you have the ability to go straight to either through either BUDS or an option 40 contract or 18 X-ray program, I would recommend it. I think the concept of it used to be back in the day that you had to go and do something else, and then because you kind of learned the suck, because you used to not be able to go. The 18 X-ray program didn't exist for the longest time, and they only would take special forces guys. You could go to selection after you'd been in the Army for a little bit, and there were some advantages to this, right? Like, you were kind of understood what the Army was. You understood what it sucked like to be in the regular Army, and people definitely non-18 X-rays are definitely more appreciative of being in group. Having said that, there's no point of you wasting 3 years of your life as an 11 Bravo when you can just go straight to the 18 X-ray program or the option 40, and you just basically go be a Ranger. I don't think anybody will tell you any different. So going to a tier 1 SMU, one, I actually don't think that you can't go straight into it. But the 3 that I know of, or I guess the 4 technically, is BUDS, RASP through the option 40, and Green Berets through the 18 X-ray program. And then I don't know what the name of the Air Force Special Operations program, but you can actually even go into aviation right away. It's called Street Seat, or Army Aviation. Horses are cool. I grew up with horses. My mom always had them. Yeah, I didn't grow up with them, but I can tell you, anybody who ever wants to get into a hobby, horses are cool. It's an expensive hobby, though. I will warn you of that. So let's see here. So what was the question? Oh, what about SWIC? So SWIC are special warfare combat craft crewmen, right? So basically your boat guys, right? They're the sort of the boat time. So whenever you see a SEAL team and you're there's boat guys, whether it's at the normal Navy SEAL level or SEAL Team 6, it's the SWIC guys who operate in the boat. So they have their own selection, their own process, their own training pipeline. Um, yeah, if you want to be a special operations boat operator, that's a pretty cool guy. I've actually met a bunch of SWIC guys. I went through free fall and free fall jump master with a bunch of SWIC guys. It's a cool job if you want to do that stuff. Do you complete level 2 or level 3 Fox before going to OISA? No, you don't need to. And actually, they just in OTC for ISA, they basically teach you ASOT level 1 through 3 just in OTC in ISA. How do you train and get used to a good base of problem solving in stress situations? Harry Welsh, that's a good question. You basically you have to put yourself in problem solving situations in life, like outside of the military, or even if you can't put yourself in, if you're already in the military, just think of like high stressful situations, whether it's put yourself in a very stressful hobby, or there's a number of different things, like how do you learn how to, maybe you go take private pilot lessons, or you go skydiving, or you try some other, there's so many different skills that you can get from so many different hobbies or so many different ventures. You just try something that's going to be hard, whether it's mentally, physically, maybe a combination of both, or it's going to wreck with your nerves, like maybe something that's like dangerous, like like going skydiving, or maybe base jumping. Obviously you want to go skydiving before you do base jumping. But there are many different ways that you can put yourself in these situations, because there are many people who are in the military who have these skills, or people who are not in the military who have these skills that you would want to find a tier 1 unit, but they were never in the military. So you can find these, like Olympic athletes have these skills typically, right? And so whatever it is, like, all that stuff requires grit. It requires mental, strength, mental fortitude, having being resilient, being able to understand that failure is what actually leads you to success. Like learning to get in like embarrassing, potentially embarrassing, potentially situations, like, or some like situation where you might fail at something, right? You learn, whether it's rejection or failure, you learn every single time. So just put yourself in these situations. Don't live in a bubble, right? Get out there, get uncomfortable, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like this can just, I keep hearing me say it, right? Because it corresponds to so many different aspects of your life positively that I can't begin to tell you. Like, embarrassment is an underexplored emotion. Get out there and make a fool of yourself, right? Get out there, put yourself in positions where you can fail at something, where you might get rejected at something, because that's how you learn. Don't live in a bubble. Don't live in comfort. Comfort doesn't teach you shit. Be uncomfortable. Be in some shitty situations. That teaches you way more. All right. For the ISA, do you apply for the selection, or do you need prior military experience? Yes, you need prior military experience to go to any of the tier 1 units. Talking about WOFT, warrant officer flight training, would you be able to write a letter of recommendation? No, so I can't. What you need is an active duty CW4 or CW5 in aviation to write you a recommendation letter. Somebody who's out can't write you a recommendation letter. Plus, I'm not a W4 or W5. SWIC guys are so cool, but they get beat up bad on those boats. Yes, they do. considered applying for a blue badge PMO job. What is a PMO job? I'm so bad with these acronyms. Oh, paramilitary operations officer. Oh, I have thought about it actually. Yeah, that's actually a conversation I've actually been recently having, but I'm in a process of doing something else right now. So we'll just leave it at that. So, anyways, I think we are at 2.5 hours into this live. I think everybody has been awesome. We have had, yeah, it's just, yeah, this live has been awesome. I hope everybody likes the graphic that me and Chat GPT built together, but I built it, well, I directed it. I did do the actual physical building, but I had to go through like about 20 different versions of this because Chat GPT wouldn't listen to me. I will eventually put this up. But anyways, I appreciate everybody. I hope everybody has a good rest of their evening. So I am going to start streaming more. I actually plan to stream tomorrow from the gym. And then on Friday, I'm going to be doing a stream. I would have done a stream yesterday, but because it was Memorial Day, and then also I wanted to do some more research about the stuff I could talk about in this particular stream, that I decided to push this a day. So next week, we're going to do a live tomorrow from the gym. Friday, we'll do another live. I'm actually going to put up a poll of subjects you guys want me to talk about. And then we'll combine that with maybe some current events and then talk about the things that you want to talk about. And then every week I'm going to try to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? And we'll just keep doing a poll every week of the subjects you guys want to talk about, because a lot of people talked about wanting me to do more stuff on selection, and which is why we're doing this whole live on selection. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dark Wizard. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for Lay Diamond. Thank you, Flo, for all the money, brother. All right. Well, you guys are cool. GB nap time. Yes. I haven't looked into Manus AI, but I do so much. Like, I know that there's restrictions on Cloud with how much you can do. I do so much assistance that, but I'm always on the out. I'm always on the lookout for better processes. Like I'm definitely not somebody, or like try not to be stuck in my ways as the old man that I am. Because I am 41, about to be 42. So anyways, I appreciate all of you. Hey, and if anybody has not, I put up a landing page. I am now doing coaching for not just physical health, but mental health. I do programs, but I also do selection prep. So if you guys want, there's a landing page in the link to my bio, and you'll see it under Tier 1 training, our Stoic Viking training. And if you guys are interested, we can do a consultation call, and then that money that you put towards that consultation call will go towards whatever program that we develop for you. Whatever you want, I can do pretty much anything: physical, mental, selection. You tell me what. So that's up. If you guys want to be a part of it, let me know. If not, I appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you later.